splash around in here.
What you just saw was the milkshake fiend known as Daniel Plainview, absolutely dominating, assaulting, and humiliating Eli Sunday. But don't feel too bad for Eli, for he is also quite the piece of work himself. What most media will have as a central conflict is some form of moral dilemma. Good versus evil, depraved versus pure, positive against negative. Of course, there are many examples of gray zones, morally foggy stories, but what if a story has no moral compass? What if it just wants to show the audience the deepest, darkest pits of the human psyche? Then you would get the relationship between Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday. In the 2007 PTA magnum opus There Will Be Blood. So in this video we will be breaking down each character, and more importantly what makes their dynamic tick.
I have a competition in me. I want no one else to succeed.
Starting with Daniel makes the most sense. He is our main character and we follow his journey throughout the film. Daniel Plainview is many things. An oilman, a father, a drainage enjoyer, and not to forget a milkshake enthusiast. But his most ostensive trait is narcissism. Daniel has this intrinsic need to be above people, that nobody should challenge him in any way, shape, or form. Anything that Daniel doesn't like hearing, he takes as a personal attack, whether it was intended for that purpose or not. Take for example when he was trying to rip off the Sundays for their oil-rich land. For all intents and purposes, Eli was actually trying to get a fair deal out of Daniel, where he rightfully calls out his scummy deal, where Daniel would purchase the Sunday ranch for quail hunting rates instead of oil rates, what Daniel is actually making the purchase for. Daniel gets visibly upset when Eli protests this, trying to dismiss Eli and talk to Abel, who seems much more open to the idea of getting scammed. I think this was when Daniel first clocks in Eli as a threat, when in all honesty all Eli did up to this point was ask for a fair price for his land. Doesn't help that Eli has a very smug way of carrying himself and talking. Daniel later reciprocates this perceived slight by blessing the oil well with Mary Sunday when Eli asks to bless it beforehand. It's a very petty thing to do. He could have just let Eli do it and be done with it, but he goes out of his way to provoke Eli any chance he gets, because Eli does have a certain level of influence that Daniel doesn't, through the Church of the Third Revelation. Later, when one of Daniel's workers gets into an accident, Daniel attends one of Eli's sermons, where he would see Eli for the eccentric liar that he is, when Eli quote-unquote heals a woman with arthritis. Taking a look at how Daniel talks with Eli shows a lot of animosity from Daniel's side. There is a certain level of irritation from Daniel's voice, like he wants the conversation to be over as soon as possible. His face vexed at the mere sight of Eli. What makes Daniel even more infuriated is the fact that Eli tries to blame him for the accident, implying that if he blessed the well, none of this would have ever happened. When Eli blames Daniel's carelessness, and when Daniel's son HW loses his hearing in another accident, add on top of that Eli asking for his money, Daniel just explodes, resulting in the scene that I showed in the beginning. And it's not just to Eli this aggression is extended. Daniel straight up threatens to murder Tilford for telling Daniel to take care of his deaf son. It wasn't even a passive-aggressive remark, but this immediately sets Daniel off, when in reality it is kind of his fault that his son is in this predicament. Daniel is someone who hates people, but he is so incredibly lonely at the same time. One thing I will give Daniel is that he does love his adopted son HW, but more in the sense of he loves the idea of a son, someone to accompany him, someone to help him, someone to be like him and to take over after him. He seemingly abandons HW when he finds out that he has a brother, and when his brother turns out to be not what he expected, he crawls back to HW. Daniel didn't start off as a good person and became progressively more monstrous throughout the film. He was a horrible person that progressively got worse throughout the film. So let's take a look at Daniel's so-called foil.
Do you think God is going to save you for being stupid? He doesn't save stupid people, Abel.
It's very important to note that, from Eli's perspective, he prevented a man from scamming him out of his land, and Eli was mostly minding his own business. And then the same man, Daniel, beats him up when he asks for his money. Peak comedy. No, but seriously, put yourself in Eli's shoes. He was not the aggressor at all. Don't get me wrong, Eli is not a paragon of virtue. He is a liar and a fraud that preys on very vulnerable people. The interesting thing about Eli is that he is not a match for Daniel in the slightest. He is lesser than Daniel in every way imaginable. As much of a predatory businessman that Daniel is, he at least offers some kind of material value to people. Meanwhile, all Eli has are lies and performances. Speaking of performances, I think Paul Dano does an amazing job on this one. I know that Tarantino has opinions on this performance in particular, and I don't know what esoteric image he had of Eli Sunday as a character, as I am not an Oscar-winning director like him. But no, I think Paul Dano was perfect in this role. He really did show Eli for the pathetic nasally worm that he was. Cause that's what Eli conceptually is. He is someone pretending to be bigger than himself. For example, Paul Dano has a very, let's say, pubescent voice. I'm one to talk. I'm 21 and I sound like whatever this is. And that's amazing for Eli, cause he talks a big game but he sounds like a screaming teenager. And he has this soft, kind of frail mannerisms as a part of his character, which Paul Dano embodies perfectly in the role. A lying child trying to be a prophet. And the only time he gets the better of Daniel was when Daniel was at his lowest point mentally. Even then he required other people to even get to Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel just slaps him around when he felt like he had enough of Eli, and all Eli could do in response was squeal, cry, and try to take his anger out on his family. And when he finally gets retribution on Daniel, and the baptism scene that's synonymous with the film, he just looks like a puppy that caught up with whatever he was chasing. And he is terrified of Daniel when he whispers something to Eli. We don't exactly hear what Daniel says to Eli, but we can infer from later in the film that Daniel said he was going to eat Eli. Now there is one more scene with Eli and Daniel, but I will save that for the conclusion part. Okay, now that we've taken a closer look at each character, let's talk about what their conflict is all about. As Daniel says, he has a competition in him. He wants no one else to succeed, and he hates everyone bar his son. He sees someone of growing influence in Eli, but he also sees Eli for the fraud that he is. So Eli irks Daniel to no end just by existing near him. On the opposite side, Eli has never experienced anyone like Daniel. As far as we can tell, he has had no opposition in his life up to this point. He seems to rule his family with an iron fist, driving out his twin brother Paul, inadvertently bringing Daniel to himself, and through his church he has influence over the town people as well. So Daniel coming in there and undermining Eli is a foreign experience to him. But he does seemingly get the better of Daniel in the end, until
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up!
Don't bully me, Daniel!
Before getting into their final confrontation, let's put into perspective where Daniel and Eli are in their lives. They both have, quite frankly, lost everything, being nothing but themselves. Daniel is rich, but he has lost the only meaningful connection in his life, and it's all purely Daniel's fault. Like, imagine having a deaf child, that you are partly responsible for them being deaf, but you never even bother to learn sign language, calling HW many awful things in their final encounter. And now Daniel's just an angry man drinking himself to death. Over on Eli's side, Jesus has completely failed to inform Eli about the troubling times in the economy, and he needs help from his old friend Daniel, and Daniel is having none of it. He mentally breaks down Eli, attacking every part of his being, greatly describing, showing his dominance over Eli, and at the end he quite simply makes Eli forfeit his god, then kills him, ensuring that if there is an afterlife and God, Eli will have no standing there. We don't exactly know what happens to Daniel after this. Maybe Daniel gets punished, maybe he doesn't. He is rich after all. I don't think it really matters. Daniel's life is pretty much over either way. It's important to preface that outside of There Will Be Blood being a masterpiece, a dynamic like this one does have a lot of value. There is a lot of literary merit to it, cause the film does explore two equally horrible sides of the same coin, like Daniel's extreme capitalist exploitation juxtaposed to Eli's more evangelical exploitation. But outside of that, there is like a meta enjoyment that the audience can get out of it as well. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I was not cheering for Daniel at all in the film. Maybe some people wanted him to redeem himself, but it's just horrible people doing horrible things to each other. And they both deserve each other. So as a viewer, I enjoyed the spectacle and rooted for the downfall. And they both sure got their downfalls. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this video. Have a nice day or night wherever you are. More videos will come soon-ish, so please consider leaving a like and subbing as well. Bye.